right. How's everyone? Oh, let's see. Who do we have here? Are we ready? Are we ready? Let's go. Good morning. Good morning, Bailey.
Hello, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. I'm working from my bedroom, as you can see, until I go to the airport immediately after this call. So,
Oh. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Vivian Kaye. I am the founder and CEO of Kinky Curlyaki. I am also your host. I am a BFF of the Founders Fund. And today I will be chatting with Bailey, Miss Bailey Parnell. She is from the Skills Camp. She is the founder and CEO of a soft skills training company. Now, I've never, nowadays you're hearing a lot of people teaching about the hard skills and, all that stuff that no one really, that people think they need to learn. But really, I think soft skills are, especially in the age of and typing and people not seeing each other, soft skills are really, it's a lost art, I want to say. We're just going to get into it because I know you got some airport stuff you got to do. So I think we should just get into it. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A box. So there's two little chat bubbles and it says Q&A. So if you have your questions, please feel free to put your questions in there. I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about Bailey. She's a founder and CEO of Skills Camp. It's a soft skills training camp and was named one of Canada's top 100 most powerful women. Oh, I'll just give you a little round of applause. Bailey is also a TEDx speaker with over 1.5 million views, an award-winning digital marketer, a businesswoman with a talent for helping people develop the skills they need for success. So her skills and her expertise have been featured in Forbes, CBC, Fox, Flair magazine, and more. She's currently completing her part-time master's in communication and culture at Ryerson University with research looking into social media's impact on mental health, the results of which she presented at the World Youth Forum in Egypt. When did you do that?
So I've actually gone twice. I went last year in November and this year in December. And basically imagine a UN type situation with a bunch of politicians, world leaders, a bunch of youth, journalists, that sort of thing, and all discussing issues relating to youth. And so, of course, my context was social media's impact on youth mental health.
Wow. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, what is, well, not even just on you.
Well, that could be a whole, we can talk about that for a week on a separate webinar about social media's impact on mental health. My actual work is about explaining kind of the risks of social media as a risky behavior, like sex or drugs or alcohol. And then if abstinence without consequence is not an option, how do you practice safe social, and kind of my 5 steps towards safe social. So even as we get into today, I'm happy to take this conversation any direction.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah, I think because again, like I said, with people just being on the internet and, that whole comparison and look where so-and-so's at. And, I've done the same work and I'm not there and it makes you feel inadequate. I think it's something we probably could talk about a little bit later on. So let's get into it. Give us your version of what you do and how you even became a top 100 powerful woman in Canada.
Oh, yeah. So not overnight. It's actually because one of these talks that I do is about my entrepreneurship journey and kind of how I went through kind of an iterative approach to finding the passion. And it certainly wasn't overnight. And it was through many jobs that I learned a little bit more about what I liked. And so in true workshop fashion, so there's one part of my life, which is Skills Camp. And that's what you mentioned, the soft skills training company. And so there we'll work with a lot of businesses, big and small, a lot of higher ed, government, to build soft skills in their staff and students. So it's hotly debated that they're called soft skills, or you call them whatever you want, transferable skills, essential skills, life skills, 21st century skills.
Adulting.
Like, everybody's got their favorite term. So go ahead, call them what you want. But it's about things like the skills that characterize our relationship with ourselves and with others. So things like resilience, teamwork and collaboration, emotional intelligence, a lot of intergenerational understanding recently, a lot of stress management, which I'll give you a small taste of the things I think that are most helpful for people to remember, and especially for entrepreneurs to remember. And also, as you become an entrepreneur, when you're creating these spaces for your teams to grow, what to keep in mind. And I'll also go through my entrepreneurship journey, and that way people can ask questions about each portion of it or all of it. And I know this was initially called leadership skills, so again, I'm happy to take it in either direction. So should we get going?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, then. So I will share my screen with everybody. If in just a second, you should be seeing a slide and my face on the screen. So
See it.
let's see here. Okay, there we go. You're good? I'll also keep an eye on the chat and the QA over here on my other screen, just in case
you do that, and I'll manage that part. Like, if there's a question in there, I'll jump into it.
Cool. Okay, then. So a little bit about my story. I didn't want to go too deep because it's actually the first part of this whole talk that we're doing today. My name is still Bailey Parnell. This much you know, and Skills Camp I've already talked a little bit about. And what Viv mentioned was also that the other half of my life and my research is about social media's impact on mental health, which always seems to find its way back to every conversation. And I think one of my favorite things about studying that area is that when I talk to new people, everybody has a story. Even if they're not on social media, they have some story of something they've seen or something they're experiencing or that their kids or even grandkids are going through. So it's been a gateway to open up a lot of really interesting conversations about everything: time management, mental health, mindfulness, frustration, youth suicide. Honestly, is serious. It can really go in any direction. So that's pretty interesting as well. Skills Camp's worked with a number of businesses. Like I mentioned, we've worked big, small, all over the place, colleges, nonprofits. And my favorite thing about that has been kind of what I feel most grateful about is that we've worked with people in every kind of industry you can think of, in every size of company, from every social location, in many cities. And when you're talking about things as deep as conflicts people are going through, or like we're going to cover a bit today, stress management and the stressors people are facing in and outside of work, I feel like I've had such wonderful insight into how people work and how very different people work. And so the stuff we're talking about today, or if you have questions about any specific one of these industries or even how we got a client, I'm happy to share all that stuff as well. So let me take you back to the beginning of my entrepreneurship journey. The first thing we all need to know.
No, now you know.
Entrepreneurship is hard. and my first business was probably the hardest. And that was painstaking, under the core heat of the sun, out all day, making chump change. And that business was my booming freezy business. I was 7 years old. It was awesome. Basically, we would buy these jumbo freezies. I want to say 7, 8, 9. We'd buy these jumbo freezies. We'd put it in our camping cooler. We'd put the cooler on a wagon, and then we would run around the block, and I would carry the wagon, and my sister would be on the back yelling, "Freezies, freezies." That was probably the hardest business of all. Physical labor. Wasn't a fan of that one.
You learned very quickly.
Yeah. So then it's kind of funny. So you can see a little bit of an example here. That cooler on that kind of wagon, and that was the business. And it's interesting because when I actually looked back about what I did learn in that business from a young age, and what my dad maybe helped facilitate at the time, was things like financing. And he would say, it costs, let's pretend, I don't even remember now, $12 to buy this box of freezies at Costco. And if you sell each of them for 50 cents or $1, then this is what you're going to make, and because you need to pay for the box. And so that was return on investment. I learned about management because managing my sisters is quite the feat. And I also learned about when you're working with people who have separate skills, because Kelsey, my younger sister, epic with the markers, so she could make our signs. She was great at marketing, things like yelling out freezies and doing all that jazz. Sales, just this young, sweet 7-year-old being like, well, you could wait for the ice cream truck, or you could go with us. 2 young, sweet 7-year-olds, local business. Who knows when they're going to come, but we're right here.
Well, that's the beautiful thing about, getting into business as a child, is that you see what people, like, you see your child or children's innate skills. And once you see those skills, it's good to help them develop that. That's dope. I like that. Shout out to
I think the most important part of
your
that
dad.
business, which I didn't get again until much later in life, was that feeling you get when you've actually done something for yourself.
Yeah.
When you've worked hard and you've had that payoff, even though it might have been $100. Let's just say $100 when you're 8 is like the lottery.
You're a millionaire.
You're like, I'm saving up to go for 2 siblings. So that was the first business. And then fast forward, and I didn't have a business again until I wanted to say officially until 2016, and that was Skills Camp. And in between, a lot of things happened, and so much so I actually didn't want to be an entrepreneur. I started in foreign news journalism and wanted to do things like Rogers TV, local television, and go abroad and that sort of jazz. And then I liked storytelling, but I didn't like the lifestyle design of TV, and that anything else could like someone could fall on the wrong street corner at the wrong time and you have to go. And the people who were most successful in that business were either working really early mornings or really late nights. And I had to think about that stuff too. So I liked the tools of social and digital marketing better, and the skill of storytelling. So I had this original plan of working in TV, and then I had what I liked, and it felt like, even though it seems connected now, media and really just another form of media, at the time, it felt like such a decision that needed to be made. Am I going to abandon this original plan that I've told everybody about? That I told them this was my goal, to do foreign news journalism, but I like this social and digital marketing, and this is opening up doors. And so do I go with what I like or the original plan? And so this was kind of the first time where I felt like my passion had changed, that I still liked storytelling, but that I had to abandon what was the original plan. And it probably felt weirder for me because I had publicly told everybody, and then it's kind of also a pride issue. And do you look like you couldn't cut it or something like that?
Well, how did everyone react to that? Like, how did your friends and family react to that?
I mean, nobody was fazed at all. The thing is, I felt that way, but I was still young, and everybody else is expecting that you're going through these career changes, that you are testing out things to see what you like. And it was really, this has happened more than once in my career, even as an entrepreneur, where you realize it's your own issues holding you back.
You were your own worst enemy.
Yeah, your own fear, or in this case, it was that probably most people even listening right now, we are goal oriented, we are motivated. We wouldn't be even here if we didn't believe that we could accomplish the things that we set out to accomplish. And so it's also kind of a conversation with yourself about, well, why do I care? Like, why am I holding myself to this when nobody else is holding me to this?
All right.
And so I worked at I was working in social media at Ryerson University and in higher education, and that's also where I worked before I went full time with Skills Camp. And but before that, I thought that okay, the perfect way would be to combine that original plan and TV with social media. And so I spent some time doing social marketing for TV, and worked at places like CBC and Bell Media and these brands, Much Music, MTV. And I'm very glad I did that, because it taught me what I don't want. And
that's usually what happens, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it was on that was a contract, and it was kind of the cliche corporate vibe at the time, where you're lots of red tape, antiquated systems, slow processes. No one had any autonomy. And I was there saying, I can do this better, faster, and cheaper. all of the big three. Why won't you let me design this? Why are we waiting for MTV US to send us graphics after this story is 2 days old? I can design it. Don't worry, I know brand standards. And so it was kind of frustrating there. And as much as I enjoy them, I didn't think that my talents were best used convincing y'all to watch more Kardashians on E. And so I had to think about kind of what I wanted in my life and in my career. And I liked prestige. I liked working for universities. I had a talent for storytelling. I liked the lifestyle design of social marketing, and I liked being able to have a positive impact, that everything I was doing actually made the world a better place. And it took me going to Bell Media to also realize that I had all of that in education. And so that's when I went back and spent most of my, actually probably not most anymore, but a lot of my career at Ryerson University doing social marketing, digital community, that sort of thing. And so much so that there was this, you can't write this stuff kind of storybook moment. Before Bell Media, I thought my perfect job would be doing social marketing for HBO, because it was that new path with my favorite TV works and channels and all that jazz. And when I was at Bell is when I learned that HBO was a Bell Canada property.
What is it?
I know. And I actually saw the job of the person doing social marketing HBO. And there was a lot of turnover there while I was there, and there was turnover of this position. And so this is the part you can't write. I want to say the week or the day after I stopped that contract, this role came open to apply for, social marketing for HBO. And I sat there and I was like, I'm X.
When you put it out there in the universe.
I know, but I closed it. I closed it and I was like, I don't want that. And if I didn't do that contract, if I didn't spend those months there learning that, I would have applied. I would have still thought that was the role that I wanted, and it wasn't. And so I think it takes like this kind of trying. And now you have what felt like to me to be now the second time this passion has changed. It's actually not TV. What did I like about TV, and where was that present in higher education, which seems kind of two very opposite industries now. And so then we had this idea that you're supposed to find your passion, and along the way, no one ever really tells you how. And so then we end up being in our 30s and 40s having midlife crises because we've never figured out that thing that drives us. And so I found this model that I wanted to share with everybody.
Kaye.
Yeah, it's one that I like to share with young people as well, because it's something that changes all throughout life. But when I first saw this, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, yes, that's what I've been doing during my career, and I didn't even know it. And it's a Japanese concept meaning the reason for being, or what we might call the passion in the center, the ikigai. And it's 4 overlapping circles of what you're good at, what you love, what the world needs, and what the world will pay for. And so like, this is kind of detailed, but let's pretend you overlapped love and what you're good at, you find your passion. And if you can overlap that with what the world needs, you're starting to get a little bit further into your mission and your, and there's instances of this where you have maybe delight and fullness, but you don't have wealth because it's something that the world won't pay for. And we're getting into the nonprofit space. And so I realized that through my career, when I was doing broadcast journalism, I was learning more about what I was good at. And things like storytelling is what I liked about that. And I realized that I could see a story and could communicate it in a way that was interesting. And when I was doing digital marketing for TV, I was learning more about what I loved, which was that kind of that freedom, that ability to take it with me, the storytelling ability back into the hands of the people. And when I was doing it for education, now I was kind of combining those and saying, wait, but if I'm going to have these skills now and I figured out what I like to do with it, what do I think the world needs more of? And I think it's education. And then finally, what do you love? Like, this thing changes forever, or else I could have just stayed there. And it's okay, well, what do I love more? What am I even better at? What does the world need more of? And who will pay me? And right now, I think that, well, for the present, that's Skills Camp, right today, that's what I'm good at. And that's kind of where Skills Camp was actually born out of, which was these this idea that I'm good at storytelling. So the actual delivery, I'm good at buying people in and speaking. I love speaking. I like sales. I like this world of education. I think the world needs more education. I think the world needs more soft skills. And then the story of our lives, making people pay for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that entrepreneurship was honestly never my passion. I got to the point where I was not the person growing up saying, yep, I'm going to run a business. I'm going to be a CEO. I don't care what the business is. There was this problem that, in fact, I actually said the opposite. When I was back in my school days, I remember saying things like, no, I would never want to be an entrepreneur because it's too much responsibility. Ties me down to a physical place. People are responsible. I'm responsible for people's livelihoods. Maybe I cannot move, like all this stuff. And so, but then this problem presented itself, which was a skills gap here and a lack of soft skills. And I just thought that I was the perfect person to solve it based on all of that career history that you had just seen. So maybe it was there all along in that freezy business, and that's why it's funny to look back now. But I just think as you're going through the motions, we should be maybe testing those different things and not waiting for the passion to find us, but actually going out and testing what our passion is. And starting there. So
the only way you can find those passions is if you actually go out and try and do different things. Like, don't be afraid of like you did. Like you weren't afraid of what everyone thought. If you felt the need to go and do it, you went and did it. And then through doing that, that's when you discovered you didn't want that job at HBO.
Yeah, it's for sure. And I learned a lot of things along the way as well. Like one of those things I mentioned about kind of getting in your own way. And so I'm seeing some questions in the chat. I like talking to you,
guys. If you could put the questions in the Q&A box so we can see those too.
This is a stress management session, but I'll get onto that in a minute.
We're starting as to why we're stressed. That's where we're starting
at. Yeah, exactly. Why we're stressed. So another thing I learned along the way was just that we get in our own way.
Yes.
And that's very, very much connected will be connected to stress when we move on to that in just a short bit. And I also learned that when I was even making the jump to entrepreneurship was because the thing that I had been with a mentor, and this is before I went full time, and I said I want to go full time, but my biggest stressor of all things was, of course, money. Like, when isn't it? But I said, nobody's going to, like, I don't feel comfortable putting all my time and effort and money into this thing because nobody's going to catch me if I fail. Like, there's no bubble. No one's paying my rent. No one's buying my groceries if this doesn't work out. I don't have a trust fund. And so that was kind of one of the things that maybe you don't hear entrepreneurs say that I wanted to share with y'all, which was that entrepreneurship is the oldest profession, and many people have found many ways here. And if you're not giving 100% of your life and your money and everything, yourself and your stress to the business, it's not the only way to succeed. And so that I remember this mentor made me do this exercise, which I was deeply uncomfortable with at the time. And he said, okay, so what happens if you fail? And I was like, he's like, but what would happen? And I said, well, I guess I would have to I couldn't pay rent. That would be worst case scenario. And he said, well, then what? And I said, well, I would have to, I guess, move back in with my dad in Brampton. And that is not an option because I've been out since I was 17. And he said, okay, wait. So you would have a place to live and a place to eat, and you're pretty employable. So you could just get another job. And I was like,
I mean, when you put it that way.
Yeah, I could. And I do think that I'm employable, so I could. And again, though, it was me thinking, well, what if you fail and everybody sees it and you know that you made this public, or you yourself have goals? It's not always about others. It's like that I don't meet what I set out to do, and I'm a goal setter and all that jazz too. So of course, 6 months later, I went full time, and I did have enough. I wanted to have enough money in the bank to fund at least a year's worth of salary and overhead, because I know myself, and I know that if money was running low and I was focused on eating, then I wouldn't be focused on selling. And so that was a little bit different. Okay, so what do you want to move on to stress management, or do you want to take questions?
Yeah, well, like, I think let's move on to stress management, because I think what people don't realize is this is pretty stressful, especially when you decide to go all in. So how did you manage that? Like, how did you manage your mental health and not necessarily your finances, but I guess it's all tied into all that. So how did you do that?
It is all that. So of course, y'all know you're here because I run a soft skills training company. So I actually wanted to give you a portion of the workshop of stress management that we would actually do out there with a company. And I'm just a smaller portion because I know we also want to have a conversation back and forth, which, by the way, can't actually read the chat and do this at the same time. So if you're asking me things in the chat, I'm sorry, I'll just have to wait.
No, I'll take care of that. So far, it's pretty quiet. Hey guys, if you have questions, please feel free. Like, I want to know, how many people feel stressed right now? If you're stressed right now, in the chat, I want to see a 1 if you're stressed. 2, if you're skating and you think this whole entrepreneurship is easy. I would love to know. Here we go.
Okay, so I would love to know too, because if we start talking about specifics or the way or how you deal with stress, part of the benefit of these workshops when we do them in groups is people sharing how they've gotten through certain situations and doing kind of coping strategies, exercises, and people realize that other people have been doing things that they probably actually could use themselves and never thought about it that way. So stress, we'll define it as the kind of bodily tension. There's a lot, what I probably don't have to tell you all, because we're just shortening one portion of the workshop that you would actually do out in the world. It has been linked with psychological, behavioral, physical, like, issues in every aspect of your whole body. So we like to sometimes joke about it as entrepreneurs and say, like, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed, and somehow that means that we're busy or that we're being productive. And side note, only North America has this much value tied up in productivity. Like, your value to the world is how productive you are. And of course that links with stress. So one, we need to just stop the whole idea that entrepreneurs, if they're not stressed, they're not working hard enough, because stress has been linked. It sounds so funny when we say it out loud, but I've just seen it so many times. And because I have the kind of lens I have with my business, I just think that's just not healthy. Like, it's been tied to even things like psoriasis, like a skin condition.
Me, I get, like, when I'm stressed out, yeah, I get eczema all over my face. Like, it breaks. It's over.
We're calling it the health epidemic of the 21st century because it's actually tied to other real diseases.
Yep.
Forget about behavioral things like fidgeting and lack of sleep and all the results of those things, but it has so many negative impacts on us that to not manage it it's like not investing in your business at all. It's like not giving time to this thing that you need to manage.
So I want to know from people watching, how many people actually manage, how do they manage their physical stress? If you guys want to drop what you currently do. I know Isabel's saying that she works out. So I want everyone else to drop in what they do, and maybe someone can get some ideas from that.
Yeah, and today, in true workshop fashion, I'm going to also share in the chat later a link to a PDF that you can print out and do at home, an activity that we would actually give to people. Of course, we can't do it together today, but I'll share that with you later, and as well as some stress management strategies. So the biology of stress is probably the first thing that we want to understand before we can move forward and get into management strategies. So this part probably won't blow your mind, but we understand our understanding of the world comes through our conscious and our unconscious brain, and that as much as 99.999% of what we're taking in any moment is unconscious. So in that unconscious brain, survival is the top priority. Survival is the top priority. And in that brain, we have 5 times more fear-based circuits then we have reward circuits.
Mm-hmm.
And we pay 80% more attention to negative cues in our environment than positive ones, and store negative cues in our long-term memory faster and longer. And it's not that surprising. Like, it is more important to remember that this plant is going to kill you than that this plant tastes good.
It's that from our ancestors, like that fear for flight, hunter and hunting and protecting and nurturing and all that.
That's exactly right. And so, some of you may have heard about this before, but
the amygdala.
Yeah, exactly. The amygdala is the part of your brain that's responsible for fight, flight, or freeze. And when your amygdala is hijacked, so we say, let's pretend when stress hijacks your amygdala, we call it an amygdala hijack. And it's funny because the brain still works quite similarly to when it did hundreds of years ago, except the stressors now are different. And here's the most important thing to remember about an amygdala hijack. It takes blood away from your internal organs, your most important organs, and sends it to your limbs and floods you with stress hormones. So I mean things like the brain, the heart, the lungs, the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for thought. Your brain in stress is taking blood away and altering it to focus and moving it to your limbs. In an old time, to do things like run, but today to alter your brain to focus on whatever's stressing you out instead of whatever you should be focusing on. And so in this brain, we also understand 3 sections to navigate experience, or what we call the triune brain. And we have that sort of reptilian part of our brain, which honestly just think of kind of a reptile, what they're able to process, light, eat, this kind of stuff. And we have the mammalian brain, which is responsible for things like innate social relationships. Just think of any mammal that you know. And the thing that we think is unique to humans is that human and or analytical brain that can think about, that has a very strong prefrontal cortex responsible for analytical thought, able to think about thoughts, to think about stress as an abstract concept that needs to be managed is unique. We think that humans are uniquely capable of. The other thing that happens in an amygdala hijack is that your brain will forget what it deems irrelevant and may revert back to actions you learned earlier in life. Because what's happening is that in stress, we turn the prefrontal cortex offline. We stop using that analytical part of the brain, and we start reverting back to the more mammalian, reptilian part of the brain that was learned earlier in life. That's trained up right from before you even remember. And so that's why when sometimes people are in conflict or yelling or upset or really stressed, it is possible that they do or say things that they don't mean, or that they regret, or that their current self knows is wrong.
Yeah. Like I know for me, like with the stress, especially the stress part, I'll get really stressed, and then a few weeks later, when I think back at it, I'll look at something that I should have done, and I'm like, I totally didn't even see that because I was so busy focused on that thing that was stressing me. I didn't even look at anything else.
No, I know. And so that's why sometimes it's fun, this biology part, though, I guess maybe I'm just a nerd, but this is my favorite part because you're giving people the real language to describe what's happening in all of our brains. So it's kind of dual-sided because it's showing you what's definitely happening in your brain, but also the people that are frustrating you, what might be happening in theirs too. So it's inherently empathy building. And so this amygdala hijack worked you called it out. It worked very well for us earlier in our evolution when you have giant bears running at you.
We were worried about that. Now we're worried about what Karen thinks, right?
Yes. So that's so true, which is if you have a giant bear with giant teeth running at you, you do not want to be there analyzing, is it just hungry? Is it just going for a stroll? Maybe it's not me. Like you want to be using that prefrontal cortex. In the old days, you wanted fight, flight, or freeze, but those are actually the worst responses to stressors of the modern day, which you just called it out again. Things like I have to give a presentation and that makes me nervous, or meeting with someone you don't like, or feeling judged by Karen. Karen is the giant bear stress in our lives.
Yes, she absolutely is.
Yeah, or you know what? Sometimes you are your own Karen.
Absolutely.
Sorry, your name is Karen, but you are the one saying, you know, you're not good enough, or you're judging yourself, or fear that people, like I was saying earlier, people did not care when I switched from TV media to digital marketing, though it felt so large for me. And I heard
people are too busy focused on their own, Karen, their own amygdala, right? People don't pay attention as much as you think they do. And if they do, it's like they take notice and then they dismiss it because they're too busy, amygdaling in their head. So
on Karen.
Right.
Sure. So I heard this quote once that always stuck with me, which was, you stop caring as much about what other people think about you when you realize how little they actually do.
Yeah.
And maybe that seems sad, but I just think it's more liberating that everybody's got their own shit.
Yeah. So Jaddy asked the question. She's asking, how do you snap out of it when you have an amygdala hijack? Is there anything specific that you do?
Well, thank you for asking, because that's the next portion.
Oh.
Yeah. It's like I set that up, but I didn't. So when you're in that amygdala hijack, you are actually stupider because you are sending that prefrontal cortex offline, and you need that to come back online in order to manage the stress, because the prefrontal cortex is the one that calms us down and calms the amygdala down. So we have to bring it back online. And how do we do that? That's the next section, because the prefrontal cortex is the one that says, oh, wait a sec, that's not a bear, that's just a possum, you don't need to run. It's also the one that says, wait a second, Karen, that's enough of that. I actually do have this figured out, or I have the skills to figure it out. And so we need to bring that back online. And in this way, there is some acute stress that is positive. We're not so worried about that, okay, I have a last minute deadline tomorrow. And so in that way, the stress makes me focused or energetic or productive. We've all experienced that. That's acute stress, and that would be called eustress or good stress. Whereas what we have an issue with, which is much higher in the entrepreneurship population, is the chronic stress, where it's over time, it's longer, it's deeper. So the chronic stress is when it starts costing money, causing harm, more contagious than the flu, and it works on the same reward pathways as addiction. So people think they need their stress. And it's like, no, you're actually compromising your biology. So how do I bring that amygdala back online? I'm just going to go through a few of these ones that you can use, and then I'll also share that PDF with you that has upwards of 14, and you can share them in the chat as well, what you're using. So the first thing to do is question your stress. And even if you need to actually have a real conversation with yourself about, as if your stress was this abstract concept outside of yourself, where did it come from? And fortunately, as far as we know, humans are the only ones capable of doing this. So what information? Stress is just trying to provide some data to your brain to fix some shit. So we actually think of it of this, imagine this like ball outside of your brain. Well, what information is it trying to provide me? And asking clarifying questions to get to the root cause. Because sometimes, you're in an argument and I'm stressed about this deadline, but actually maybe this deadline has popped up because you've actually been in the hospital with your mother, and maybe that's stressing, that's the real stress. Or you're having an argument with a sister or your partner, and that's causing you to fumble elsewhere, and now it's piling on. And it's kind of thinking about your stress as if it were putting it outside yourself. And some people, what they'll do is they'll actually write about it or journal, and physically, if they're having trouble envisioning it like that outside yourself, that they will actually put it outside themselves and use a journal or something like that, and put like stress, shit causing stress, and think about, well, where is this coming from? And then thinking about, well, how can I get through this, like a task list. So there's also, number 2 is name it to tame it. So you question it in order to name it and bring that prefrontal cortex back online, which puts space between you and the feeling. So in the old days, like I said, what is going on here? There's a giant shadow behind the tree. I'm going to figure this out. Oh, it's just a possum. We're good. And it's kind of the same way with Karen. It's like, okay, Karen, what are you saying to me today? This giant bear stress in your brain. And you're saying, okay, I've identified it's clearly because I haven't moved my I wanted to, release that online course, and I haven't moved it forward at all. And we're now February 14th, and I haven't done anything this month. So now that I've named it, we can start treating it as if it were this thing outside of ourselves, as if it were this thing that you could say, if someone else came to you, what solution, what problem would you solve for them? Okay, well, I need to move this forward. Now let me start with time, energy, and attention. Let me put some time in my calendar. What am I going to do in that time? Do I need to, is it because right now it feels like this giant monumental course, put course online, and wait, what's just the very first step? And can I conquer that in the next 2 weeks? Even something like that. Yeah. Number 3, reframing your stress. Reframing has also been used. Everything I'm telling you can be cited. You can go check later in the research if you're actually into that sort of thing. But reframing is a strategy also used by psychologists to help people manage their stress. So what if I said to you just right now that your business and entrepreneurship is a sign that you're doing something you care about? Because if you didn't care at all, you would not stress. Nobody is stressed about the color of my sweater today because nobody actually cares. So, yeah, okay. And so what this has been linked to, this reframing, is if you can shift your attention to a positive emotion, and it feels weird if this is not already a practice for you, like love or joy or gratitude, that we actually change the brain chemistry. And they've started to track this, and you can find this in the research. You can see that the research actually makes me pretty excited. So what they've linked this to is if I can focus you on something like gratitude, like just saying, okay, yeah, I'm really freaking freaked out in my business right now and I haven't met a sales goal, but wait a sec, what am I thankful for? What does this business afford me? And just having that dialogue has been shown to reduce stress hormones. Immune function is enhanced, improves our ability to think creatively and intuitively. You're better able to navigate change, you're more resilient, and you're more flexible. But more importantly, just reframing it helps reduce the stress biologically. Such an easy thing.
It is.
Number 4, because all entrepreneurs need to be reminded.
This is super important because sometimes when you're like, and it's like, wait a minute, you have to pause. Okay, did you sleep? Have you eaten? Have you? Like, you have to ask yourself those basic questions, because sometimes doing one of those things will solve. It's like medication right there. Sometimes I'm like, wait, did I eat? You know what? Let me go eat something. Come back, and it's like, oh, it's
I know. It's so I was angry. I actually reminded myself to drink water, but it's funny because we sometimes forget that we are also animals.
Yeah.
In this weird world, and that
basic things
to be healthy, to be operating at our most mentally stable and effective. What do we need? We need exercise. We have to drink water. We need to eat healthy. We need sleep. And what's the first stuff to go when you get really busy and stressed? Whatever, I'll just cut the gym out today. Oh, did I even drink water today? I'll skip lunch. All-nighters. Work is hard.
And hustle until you die. Grind.
I know. That's just weird. It's a very odd thing. But you need this stuff, and they're the first things to go when we get stressed. So we have to work in that prefrontal cortex and say, wait a second, it might actually be better to take even a 15-minute lunch than spend 2 hours working over lunch and operating at here. And unfortunately, or fortunately for me, my brain does not let me operate without food. I wish I just got like a rumbly tummy, but I actually get dizzy and wobbly.
You have to listen to your body.
Yeah, exactly, right? And it's the first stuff to go, and entrepreneurs need to be reminded about that. Number 5, and we're only going through a few more. Breathe.
I want everyone now to just...
I know. We can do it together. So
inhale.
The magic number is 5. So let's do it together. I can't see you, so I'm just trusting that you're doing it. We'll push Karen aside for a minute. So we're going to do in for 5. And out for 5. Now we'll do it again because some of you got to 5 on number 1 and then you were holding your breath. So we'll do it again. In on 5.
Okay, ready?
In, 2, 3, 4, 5, and out. 2, 3, 4, 5. The interesting thing about breath is that it changes our heartbeats and our biological response, which is more than just it. I actually had a doctor tell me you need to breathe deeper. Actually, I think it was my massage therapist. They said, you need to breathe deeper, because I was breathing shallowly, which is also more common in women, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm not even joking. Hold your stomach in, therefore you're not deep breathing. So real things. So
you're not wearing your Spanx today? Is that why?
It's like this shit. It's like, of course, it makes perfect sense when you say it out loud, but it's like, yeah, of course you're not breathing as deep as someone who does not care about letting their stomach out. And what was happening was the doctor said to me, not only is oxygen, of course, fueling your life and your brain and everything like that, but they said if you're breathing shallowly, the unconscious part of your brain might be wondering, where is my next breath coming from? Because shallow breathing is a natural association for the brain to think,
it's because it's
oxygen is not free flowing, therefore worry about this. So it's even like a subconscious biological stress when you don't breathe deep. So why I love these stress management strategies is because we're not even getting into stuff that's like, go for massages and take retreats in Miami. This is stuff that we can do sitting at our desk right now.
Yeah.
Number 6, engaging in mindful activities. All have been linked to stress reduction. So things like going outside or camping or hiking or walking on the water, being in nature, or if you have any kind of maker activities like that require both hand-brain chemistry, carpentry, painting, knitting, coloring with your kids, whatever it might be. I'd love to hear, even in the chat, some of the mindful activities that you all engage in, because everyone's got different ones that are interesting, or they don't think, like some people say like cooking or cleaning actually reduces their stress.
Yeah, I know. I like coloring. I love to color.
Mm-hmm.
I love to wash. It's actually funny because I hate washing the dishes, but I like washing the dishes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only because I see a sink full of dishes, and it's like, oh, if I'm stressed out about something, and it's like, well, this is the one thing that I can see there's a start and an end, and you can see the difference. Mm-hmm. So it makes me feel like I've accomplished something in life. Mm-hmm. So I'll go and wash the dishes, everything, clean everything up, and then I'll just be like, oh, it feels like I did something. Even though I can't fix that other thing, I fixed this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I love that. And I also had a session recently with a company where it was executive assistants and we were doing stress management. And one of the women in the group said that she was with her therapist, and one of the strategies she uses was she realized that when she was with her therapist gave her advice and she shared it with the group, and now I'm sharing it with you. And she said that I was stressed about one area of my life, and actually she had to parse out the different areas of her life: my friends, my family, my work, my physical fitness, my eating, like whatever it was for her, myself, my self-image. And she would say, I realized that I was getting stressed about one area, and before I used to parse it out, I would let that spill over into all the other areas. But now the strategy I use is thinking, well, wait a sec, what's all good? It seems like all these 4 out of 5 areas, they're actually good. So something is fine here. Something like, I'm not a giant failure here. And focusing on just that one area in terms of stress management, treating it like a problem that needs to be solved, thinking more analytically, how can I just focus on this one area? Because wait a sec, this is all good. Let's not forget that. So that was interesting, I thought.
I wasn't. Yeah, it is interesting.
Number 7, and this is the one I'll probably spend the most amount of time on, is practicing optimism and gratitude. Now, if you pay attention in this section, and hopefully you're paying attention for the whole thing because it's not overly boring, this is the one that I remembered forever. So optimism and gratitude, of course, I already talked about gratitude, both linked to stress reduction and also just life satisfaction, overall quality of life and health. But optimism is not just being a positive or negative person. Like we often say, we often conflate positivity with optimism, but it's also how you view yourself in relationship to situations. And this is important, and I'll show you some examples. And the interesting thing is that optimists and pessimists in good and bad times react the opposite. So an optimist in good times Oh, I'm glad you love the visuals. Good. Leave a skills camp review. So an optimist in good times, they take their good moments as personal as a result of me, pervasive, this is going to spread over into other parts of my life, and permanent, this is going to last. Whereas a pessimist in bad times reacts the same way. Something bad happens to them, this is as a result of me. This is going to spill over into everything else in my life. And this is going to be permanent. I don't know if this is ever going to leave. And it's flipped in good times. So an optimist in bad times, they're saying, this is just bad luck. This is not completely as a result of me. There are other things here, and there's things that are in play that I don't have to do with my decisions. This is situation specific. This is a bad time. This does not mean that this is going to, spread over to every part of my life. And this is temporary. It's not going to be like this forever. And the pessimist in good times reacts the same way. If something good happens to a pessimist, they think, oh, good, lucky that happened this time. Clearly, everything else in the world was working in my favor except me. I didn't play much of a role in this. It's situation specific. Well, this good thing happened. That doesn't mean that my relationship is going to fix itself. And it's temporary. That doesn't mean that I'm on a good path here. So what might this actually sound like? The optimist in good times, let's say you get a good review or like a job review, or you get a good client review or whatever it might be. And the optimist would be there saying, I did a good job. I'm good at this. Let's celebrate. I'm going to tell my friends, like I'm going to make this last in other parts of my life, and I'm going to repeat this. And it's as a result of my good work. Whereas the pessimist might get that same review and say, oh, glad it worked out this time, that they went easy on me. Okay, let's conquer that next thing. And in bad times, the optimist, maybe you get a bad review or something like that, or you had a product that wasn't delivered to the best of your ability. And the optimist would say, you know what, I was off, I was sick that time, I'm going to do better next time, I'm going to start drinking more water, I'm going to figure this out. And the pessimist, that's when they're there saying, I'm an idiot, why did I do it this way? Mm-hmm. And it stays with them.
Yep.
And so in flipping into optimism and stress management, it can be as simple as asking yourself, okay, what role did I play in this? And what was out of my control? How can I make this joy last in other parts of my life? How can I take this win and spread it over? And how can I replicate this so this happens again? And in bad times, kind of the same questions. It's, well, what did I do? And what was outside of my control? And so you're not there saying like, I'm an idiot. There's an element of fate to everything, really.
Yeah. So I want to know how many people consider, like, I know I'm naturally an optimist, but I'm finding as I get older, I have to work really hard to stay optimistic. So I want to know how many people consider themselves optimists and how many people consider themselves pessimists.
Yeah. And there's no that we should want to switch into optimism for stress management and life satisfaction, just your own mental health. But frankly, a lot of people that I know are find themselves in pessimist cycles, and just going through, and then maybe even hearing this right now and thinking, well, I'm not like that. I suck.
Oh, girl, if you think anyone that thinks they suck, you don't.
Yeah. So,
you're not Donald Trump or anyone, so you don't suck.
It could always be worse. A wonderful,
it can always be
strategy. Reframing is also kind of when people say it could always be worse. It's probably the last thing you want to hear when you're stressed. Right. But it is reframing. It is kind of saying, wait, it actually could be worse. So
like, is it really the end of the world, girl? Is it really? Is it really bad that you have to move home to Brampton and live with your dad? No, you have some place to live. Like it's easier said than done when someone says it to you, but when you reframe it for yourself, it's not as harsh.
Yeah. And it's really interesting what people are saying, like, optimists when it comes to others, pessimists when it comes to myself, or like we're harder on ourselves and pessimists in those moments about ourselves. And I once heard somebody say, I can't take credit for it, but they said, what if you treated yourself like your best friend, or you even treated your stress like you would react to your friend's stress?
Yep.
And if they told you about their stress, it's kind of like a conversation almost with your own. Well, how would I react to this if my friend told me that they just had a win or a failure? I would probably say something like, well, they didn't, well, you were tired. You said you were sick. And so that's not going to be like that next time. You're going to kill it next time. Like, you might say this stuff to your friend, and if only we were that kind to ourselves. And you have to train your brain, though. If it's not natural for you, it's not just going to suddenly switch for you to tomorrow. It's where you actually need to have that conversation with yourself that might feel weird if you don't normally reflect in this way. And that says, okay, Bailey said, how would I react to a friend if they told me this? Mm-hmm. How would I do that? And having that inner dialogue with yourself.
Or would you even say that stuff out loud to your friend? Like, would you tell your friend she's an idiot? And if you are, you're a terrible friend. I mean, depending on how your tone, but mm-hmm. Would you speak that way to anyone else? You gotta, where sometimes you can't do all that negative talk is going to have an effect, and you have to flip the switch. If you wouldn't say it to someone else out loud, then don't say it to yourself.
Yeah, there's another quote, and I'm just not remembering sources today.
It's all right. No one's going to ask you for a source.
That was like, your thoughts become your words become your actions become your reality, or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, and when someone else says it to you, it's like, well, duh. Yeah, that's how it works. That comes to reality, even if in the 99% unconscious part of the brain. That's what we need to be taking care of, is the stuff that we're not always consciously focused on, because you cannot possibly compute everything in any minute. So there's a lot of these stress management strategies. Like, again, I said I'll send you that PDF, and Founders Fund will share the slides with you. But the breathing we talked about, spending time in nature, overwhelmingly linked to stress reduction. And what's the first thing that goes? I'm not going to go for a walk today, or whatever it is for you. A parkette, looking at a tree. Nature's been reduced to stress reduction, so much so that we have this element of research and therapy called nature therapy. So it's kind of funny. The number 14 is probably a good one to remember, that all feelings subside. That even in your most stressful moments, think about your most stressful moment, the worst time of your life, you got here. So clearly you did get through it, and you will get through it again. And I think number 7, having a goal and focusing on the future, is reminding yourself that this is all worth something, that I'm trying to achieve something, and with hard work comes stress. So that's the burnout. This is, like, I suppose a side plug, but my partner wrote the book, The Burnout Gamble. And the gamble is that success requires hard work. Hard work can cause stress. And the gamble is, how much of that am I going to give? How much of it am I going to manage, so that I can win that bet? So probably the good thing for us all is that we can brain train. That is a real thing that we can do. And you can see it in mammals. So, like, this is so weird to talk about ourselves like this, but you see it in dogs. Yeah, you can actually brain train mammals and ourselves to become used to situations. You can train the unconscious brain, which is really liberating, because the more you encounter these situations, if they're handled well, the less likely your amygdala is to freak out in the future. So it might feel weird for the first 500 times that you say, okay, how do I switch into optimism? What are the questions I ask? But you actually can brain train yourself so that it stops making you stress out in the future, which means we have to start. So, okay, this is the end of the formal part of the talk, and that's just one piece of our stress management. And I'll tell you actually the one thing that I'm going to send home with you. It's called the stress drivers. Let me just stop sharing it, that way I can send it to you now. It's called a stress drivers activity. And the first step to a lot of soft skills is self-awareness and understanding where you fall in anything. And so the stress drivers activity is you going through and answering a bunch of questions about yourself and things, how you might react to certain situations. And then you go to the next page and you tally up a bunch of, like, how did you respond to question 3, and put that in this one. And then you total it up and it gives you your top stress driver. So things like be strong is one, please others. And it'll give you of the 5 main ones, it'll give you a description of the stress driver, and it'll also go through a bunch of different categories about how this stress presents itself, what might stress this kind of person out, positive attributes of this kind of stress, because we talked about good stress too, and negative attributes, so where this might go wrong as well. And if nothing else, it's a self-awareness activity to realize maybe there is one area of your life that you fall into more. So I'll send that home with you, and again, all the directions and everything are on there. But and the other thing I'm going to send home with you is the sheet of all of those 14.
That's great.
So why don't we move on to some chats or questions, or if you have even unrelated leadership questions, I'm happy to answer those too.
Let's see. Let me think. Wait, let me stretch. I need to stretch. Oh, that deep breathing.
Good.
Sometimes you just need to stretch. Mm-hmm. Let's see. So I wanted to ask, I was just pulling it up actually. So,
I'm going to pull up those.
There we go. So actually, here's a question. So how can you create boundaries? How can creating boundaries help with managing stress? Are the two connected?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Boundaries, like when you're creating boundaries, I'm just assuming you're, like what you mean by this, but when you're saying, okay, I'm going to embrace JOMO, joy of missing out, instead of feeling like I need to be at every single event, because therefore I won't, that means I'm not networking if I'm not at an event every single day. Like, or social media, I mentioned, like, somehow it always ends up coming back to social media, which is huge. I need to be on this thing and it's going off all the time, and if I'm not on there, I'm not building my brand for my business or all this stuff. But gosh, we need to figure out how to manage this, because a boundary might be you doing step 2 of Safe Social, which is moderating your consumption and saying, okay, wait a sec, do I actually even like what I'm seeing? Do I even know this poster? Does this content actually provide me value, or am I just doing it because it's what everybody else does, or I feel like I have to, or I'm not in the know, even though it might be causing you harm? So boundaries would be saying, actually, I only follow people that I know. Or the opposite, because sometimes the people you know are the problematic, annoying ones. Right. I only follow inspirational. I only follow artists. I only follow like this
people
kind of
that
stuff.
Bring you joy.
Yeah. Maybe I have to be on here to build my business, but thinking of your social media as a personal brand marketing tool is very different than the addictive, extension of yourself. Right? Because every business has marketing, and if that's just a task you have to complete in the day, that's even different in the brain than the extension of myself, and my value comes here.
Right.
So boundaries will also help. Well, if you want to like share even some of the boundaries that you have, like maybe you don't go out certain nights a week, maybe you create limits for how many contracts you want to take on. It's really different for everybody, I think.
Like, I know for me to manage stress, like specifically with my phone, because I've been in business for almost 8 years now, doing this Kinky Curly Yaki. And for the first, I believe 4 years, I answered emails. So I was always answering emails, always on it. Then when I hired someone to do my emails, I turned off all the notifications on my phone for email. So I do not get email notifications, because I wanted to create a boundary where it's like I only answer emails when I'm sitting at a desk. Mm-hmm. That's it. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so then it helped to not be always on, like always working when something goes off on my phone. And then something that Stephanie Pellet taught me, she mentioned sometime last year.
Please continue your story. I'm just going to pause for 1 second, because speaking of communal failures, I left my charger on the other side of the room and I need to plug this in. So please.
All right, I'll keep it. Yeah, no worries.
Keep going.
Oh, one of the boundaries that Stephanie Pellet taught me with the phone is to turn off notifications for especially your social media. So not only do I turn off the sound, but I've turned off the badge notifications, so I don't feel the need to check it. So I always tell people, if it's a 911 emergency and you need to reach me, you need to call me, because then I know it's urgent. Whereas a text message or, notification on Instagram or an email, all that stuff can wait, because I need to create that separation. I need to have boundaries.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I love that, which is I went through this phase myself about when I actually first started my Safe Social research. It was not just social, but like notifications. And I had to turn off my email notifications for this first no work vacation I was taking in 4 years at that point. And I remember when it was liberating, and when I got back, I didn't turn back on email notifications until I went full time with my business. And then I turned those back on because, so 4 years prior, if I saw those notifications, I had been like that person that was, okay, I have to answer it right away. And then you're just kind of like always distracting yourself, and it's getting in the way of even relationships. And, but then, so I turned those off. I left email notifications off so as to make them require active, like I would actively need to go in instead of passively accepting it all the time. And then when I went full time with my business, I turned them back on because I was a different person. I could see an email, and I kind of wanted that good stress, but I also could put it down and actually not care. And I wasn't like that before.
Good. Okay. So we've got some questions going on here. So Sujani says, can you speak to a moment where you were in a stressful situation and the steps you took to get out of it?
Mm-hmm. Well, okay. So I'm probably in that this week. So
that's like every other day, girl.
Because I actually probably should share this story publicly just so other people learn from my mistakes. But I was, I want to say a year ago, or no, less than a year ago, I was stopped at the border in the US.
That's stressful.
I know. So it's kind of funny because what happened was I had a client there, and even though I didn't tell the border agent this, even though I had done a bunch of random work in the US, I had been there a number of times before, there was always reasons why those ones were legal or different under different loopholes that I actually didn't know was happening. And so I went to this one, and it was like a 5-figure mistake. I was stopped at the border, couldn't go in because I didn't have a TN, temporary work visa. So this is like a dual story. We'll talk about the stress, and then you can also just take this advice for entrepreneurship and international business. So then I didn't, the temporary work visa I didn't have. It's the one you can get at the border. And so he was making it seem like he's helping me this whole time. And then actually so much so that I'm smiling in my photo, because, and then he's like, oh, I'm like, how long is it going to take? Tell my partner on the other side. And he's like, oh, you're not going through today. And so then what happened, I called bunch of immigration lawyers after and learned, I wanted to know, why did this happen? How come it's never happened before? And how do I prevent it from happening again? The TN visa is the only one you can get at the border, which is another reason why I didn't think there would be an issue. Both lawyers told me there's a bunch of reasons. TN, post-Trump, they said we're getting a lot more calls like this from people who have had no issues before, and from even Canadians. That was also at the time of our Canada-US trade issues. And so they were saying, we're seeing this a lot. They also said, because in the past, a lot of your clients have been academic institutions, and that was true. And I didn't know, so it's kind of just ignorance. I didn't know that academic institutions fell in a different loophole. Because it was sharing research, they fall in a loophole that lets you go down on a visitor's visa and receive honorariums for work. And that's a lot of what that was true, that a lot of my US clients were higher ed. So it was just working for a bunch of different reasons, and I didn't know what those reasons were. So fast forward, and I'm stopped again with my family the next time I go. And
once they stop you once, that's it.
Yeah, so the actual legal term, like I'm fine and everything, he said, or it was technically the application for admission is withdrawn. So basically it just means, okay, go get your papers in order, come back. And as opposed to like, oh, you're criminally trying to evade us type deal. So he let me keep my nexus and everything, so we're good. But But then of course I'm so stressed, and I've stopped the next time personally when I was going for personal travel, when I was driving, and the border agent actually said to me, "You are here for no reason," quote. So then now I'm going to New York tomorrow, and I was super stressed about this. Like, I could tell the anxiety, because I get stressed over things I can't control. And so when I felt like I can't control it, then I was like, I was actually vibrating on Monday, which is very uncharacteristic for me. And so I was like, what am I going to do? Am I just going to like not tell them? Because it's not, I'm going to NYU this time, right? So now it is back to my original, which is academic institutions.
Right.
And what I didn't realize is that to get through it, I did actually use some of these stress management strategies. I'm like, okay, what is in my control? Being able to find out more information. Basically, how about what don't I know? And so I reached back out to one of those immigration lawyers and was like, if I'm don't even know like what I'm stressing about yet. I don't actually know technically what I'm stressing about yet. So, because nothing's happened yet. And so I called the immigration lawyer. I talked to them. They're the one that was like, you are fine, because it's the same reason why it was working for all those years, is that's academic institution. However, because you're probably going to get stops into secondary screening anyways, why don't we put together this packet for you that that basically says, like, that cites the law that allows you to go be there, and like gives a letter of what you're doing. And so then I'm stressed, because I'm like, well, is that going to be ready in time? I left it too late, all this jazz. And they're like, okay, well, we'll do that for you by tomorrow. And I told them how much I'm being paid. They gave me a price. And I was like, yeah, it's worth it. Because it's kind of like, sometimes if I now know what this process looks like, I will be less stressed in the future, and there's gonna be a future. Like, there's gonna be a lot more American clients. So it was even worth that money. It wasn't even a question. So I guess how you get through it is for me, what can't I control? I can't control what border agent I'm gonna get. Like, I can't control that. I can't control the news of the day. I can be as prepared as I can be. I can make this an investment of the business. I can call this lawyer. I can send an email here, and I can do that stuff. And then still I had to do things like like my stress management strategy is watching TV, but not actually just like some of my friends. I don't actually mean like mindless TV that's on in the background. I went to media school, so if I'm watching a TV show, I really have to focus on it. And if anybody talks to me, I have to rewind it. So even like watching an episode of something that's good quality television makes me focus on one thing and really mindfully focus. So I was even still doing that. Yeah. Anyways.
That's a great example. Wow.
So hopefully you also take some advice for if you're doing international work, to just make sure your visas are in order. And once you pay for it once, you can probably just do it yourself.
Yep, that's true. Okay, so Johnny asks, so Johnny with the questions. Thank you, girl. So generating revenue in entrepreneurship is a big stressor for entrepreneurs. Can you speak to how you went about getting your first few clients, such as the academic institutions, and then how you negotiated people management, etc.? I can imagine there's a lot of back and forth, and stress levels are high.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in the beginning of Skills Camp, I was working full-time at Ryerson for over 2 years before I went full-time with Skills Camp, and I was building it up. And I don't know, I don't know exactly what stage each of you are in your business, or even if you're full-time. Is everybody full-time?
Let's see, if you guys are full-time in your business,
Yeah.
put the FT, and if you're part-time, drop a PT.
Well, usually it's more like full-time. Like, it's usually like full-time.
Yeah.
Full-time here, so, okay, so it seems,
Yeah, we got a lot of,
cool. Yeah, so when I was doing that, I was building up the business and kind of building my name, building my personal brand. But like I told you, maybe I had less risk factor, and I wasn't okay jumping in without having at least a year, kind of like almost a year's worth, lots in the pipeline, a good basis, right? And so those first clients came from relationships. for sure. People I had met in higher ed, where when I was working at Ryerson, where it would even be like, we saw you speak about social media, but just because we saw you speak, we trust you speaking about, I don't know, personal branding. I started Skills Camp. The skills that were sold most at the beginning were the ones that were most similar to my previous life, which was things like personal branding, communications, strategic storytelling, all this jazz. But that allowed me, even if I had like that one thing that was doing really well, I had that storytelling lens. And I think that that storytelling lens is actually even more important at the beginning, because I would, even if it was a $250 talk, like, which is something we did at the very beginning in those first couple of years, it was like, 250, yeah, sure, we'll do it. $400, yeah, sure, we'll do it. Like, because I wanted to milk the stories.
Yep.
And those stories were way more valuable than the $250 or $400. And so we would say, I would be like, okay, great, I'm getting that testimonial. Will you be in a video? Can we use your logo on the website? Can you give us a Google review?
Yep.
Like,
Sometimes it's not monetary. Sometimes it's not all monetary.
Exactly. And something we still do, if it's valuable enough, we'll say, okay, since you can't meet our rate, depending on the client, obviously it's per situation, but depending on the client, we'll say, since you can't meet our full rate, can you give us 3 warm introductions to people in the organization, or people
That's a great idea.
Yeah, or people you know that are looking for soft skills, even if it's not in the organization, soft skills training. So then it's about like, well, in the absence of this much money, you're getting lead gen and kind of like a resource exchange. Sometimes I've even seen entrepreneurs do a resource exchange. So I'll come do a workshop for your employees if you give me like legal advice or that I don't have to pay for, something like that. Or whatever it might be for you, right? Like maybe you even, sell physical journals. Like, what can you give staff some journals or help out a conference in exchange for what that business does for you, or also get lead gen or something like that. And so I would really milk the stories at the beginning. Even in my own personal speaking career, gosh, at the beginning, sometimes these talks, it's so funny. I actually just posted something on Instagram this morning about how this talk at NYU on Friday, well, okay, so I've been to this conference 3 times before, 3 years past, 2017, 18, and 19. And I started going when I was at Ryerson, and I presented, and it was unpaid, but it was NYU, and it was a cheap conference, and then part of my role at Ryerson was to spread the work that we were doing there. So I went, even though it was unpaid, and maybe like, some of the audiences change, but I treat every talk like it's a big keynote stage. You just do a good job, you do your best job, even if it's 6 people in the room, and you continue to do that. I went back the next year, and this year they invited me back to do their keynote in their 20th anniversary. And so what I shared in the post this morning was the shit that people don't see is those years that you're doing dozens of free unpaid shit, giving up your time, of course, but honing in on your craft, building those relationships, having people vouch for the fact that you are a good speaker, or that you can, be on a panel or whatever your business is. And, or kind of like the same reason why you give testers. And it's like all of that led to doing a good job for them time and time again. Now they're a client. So you don't see that stuff. Another way so now fast forward to today, when I talked about milking that story, we milked that story online as well to help with SEO. And understanding SEO was helpful. Having a Google business was helpful because of understanding what people search.
Right.
So people search soft skills training. That's the term that brings them most to our website. If you search leadership training Toronto, you're not going to find us, which is fine because
it's a heavy term. Lots of competition.
Yeah, exactly, right? I think if you search personal branding expert Toronto, you're not going to find Skills Camp. The people coming to us are searching soft skills. There's a few of our skills that are like hot on Google, but so now fast forward, and knock on wood, but we don't really do much outbound sales because it just comes through the contact form. And the reason why, though, is I know why. It's if you go search soft skills training right now, wherever you are, you're going to see Skills Camp on the front. And the fact that we even have reviews, like as if we were a product, really helped us. And I benched, kind of like when you think about benchmarking, I took this, what worked in my marketing, social marketing, startup, like almost like tech space for a bit. I was thinking, well, what works in this space and what's missing in the training and development space? And I'm not joking. I've had clients tell us that they went with us because they liked our website, because we had Google reviews.
Right.
And I was like, well, yeah, of course, because that's how I shop too. And although if I showed you some of my competitors in the training space, like no Google businesses, let me tell you, no good user experience on the website, not a lot of modern iconography. So it was like taking, well, what works in these industries that might not be exactly the same, and how do people expect to do this, and what can I kind of like innovate in this space too? And so those are things that got us clients that maybe you didn't expect. And then always, if you're B2B, it's about relationships, which means intentional relationship building, and not just going to that networking event where people like just want to get everybody there wants to get business. But one thing I'll do is I kind of go to two types of networking events. I go to the ones that are for me and my personal development, like for example, maybe a founders fun night, or or like, I don't know, WXN I'm a part of. I'm also part of SheEO. I'll go to those too. Those are like for me and my development, but the other networking events I go to are the ones where my clients hang out. So who are my clients? Well, largely they're in learning and development or human resources. Where are they hanging out? So I go to the HR conferences. I go to learning and development, like pub nights. And I don't go there saying like, hey, everybody, I'm here to sell you. I go in there kind of like, maybe I'll get some relationships out of this, or maybe at least if nothing else, they know what Skills Camp is. I don't want to make anybody feel like I'm selling.
Yeah.
Because especially if you're at a pub night, like it's not what they want. But they remember you, and they always end up. It always pays off. So
right.
Yeah.
That's great. Wow. Woo! My brain is full. My amygdala is charged. Is that a thing? Sorry?
That's good.
That's good. My amygdala is in my ikigai. I learned all kinds. I love words that I don't typically use. So of course, that's what I'm going to be using today. Well, thank you ever so much, Bailey. That was informative. So if people need to find you, where can they find you?
So you can find me at Bailey Parnell on everything. And Skills Camp is at Skills Camp HQ or skillscamp.co. But honestly, if you just Google it, that will also come up.
Google me. That's great. Okay, well, thank you so very much for your time. And everyone else, thank you so much for your time. I hope you found this session resourceful and informative, and hopefully you can apply many of the strategies that Bailey laid out to your own life and to your own entrepreneurial journey. And we're going to, Founders Fund will send you the slides, so you'll have access to that. And, let us know how you're doing. If you're doing it, post it up on Instagram, tag Founders Fund, and let us know how you're using Bailey strategies in your entrepreneurial journey. So that's great. Thank you so much, Bailey.
Of course, I'm just sharing my email in there too. I'll remain available to anybody, of course, if you want to chat or have very specific questions or anything like that.
Great. Okay. Well, have a great flight. Where are you going to? You're going to New York?
New York. Yeah.
All right. Well, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. I'm sending you good vibes. Good flight vibes. Good flight vibes.
Okay.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.